Good morning, everyone. Once again, we would like to welcome you to our second week of Board of Governors review series. Offered by the California Association of Healthcare Leaders and the San Diego Organization of Healthcare Leaders. We will be tackling today the body of knowledge on healthcare finance, which is there are 24 questions in the exam, which constitutes 12%, and the human resources, which is 22 questions or 11% of the questions, total questions. So welcome again, and thank you for being with us. And hopefully you will be learning from us today. And before we start the main event, we'd like to reintroduce ourselves, the members of the committee. So next slide, please. So once again, I'm Michael DeCoco, and I'm the chair for the Advancement Committee for CAL.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Tweedo. I'm the co-chair of this committee, and it's great to be here. Happy Saturday.
Hi, Rick Nerad, member of the committee.
Session?
You're on mute.
You would think that I learned this. Sorry, Sachin Gangapantula, member of the committee for the last 2 years. Thank you for joining us today.
Nora Powers, been with the committee since 2011. Been through a lot of these, but these are exciting now that we can do these virtual.
And Jessica is not here today.
Okay, James Revels, co-chair, career development, and co-chair of the committee as well.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So before we'll start with the healthcare finance, we'll just give you some updates or about about what we are offering. We are offering the FSH exam scholarship. So we are reimbursing the exam fee for exams taken from September 2022 to March 1, 2023. So you can apply here on this link. It's not working for me. Can you please click the link, Twee? Yeah, so just click that link and you'll be able to apply here. So we are just complete the application, schedule and take the exam and provide the confirmation to us, and submit it to the scholarship to the CAL scholarship application. Then we will select randomly the applicants, and we will reimburse the 225 exam fee. So it's a good chunk of money, right? So just avail for that. So here's the page for the application. Okay, thank you. And the next on the slide is can you qualified education credits. So I would like to remind everyone that this whole session from last week to the end of the week 5 next month, you have a total 8 qualified education credits. So you can self-report that in your My ACHE, and that will go towards your application as well. So because I think we'll be needing 32 or 30 education units. 36. So 36. Sorry. Then
well,
you can.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you can apply that 8 credits to your application. So, and we also have just a reminder for everyone to please, once we are done with the whole session on next month, we will be sending you a Survey Monkey. So we would like you to please respond to that Survey Monkey, because we take seriously any feedback that we get from you to improve our future Board of Governor review exam series. So we'd love to hear back from you. Next slide, please. Some events that we would like that's available for you to attend so that you can earn the qualified education units. We have the CAL event networking on October 27th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. North Coast. It's an in-person in Santa Rosa. So it's a 1 qualified education units. And on October 28th from 8 to 9:30 a.m. Learning from Leaders featuring Tiffany Castor. I think she's the COO from St. Francis Medical Memorial Hospital, and Common Spirit. So she will be focusing on creating forums for meaningful dialogue. So please sign up for that. And also the San Diego Association of Healthcare Leaders is offering their annual conference. We'll be having their annual conference on October 25th and 27th. And I think the topic is about show me the money in San Diego. So it will be a 1.5 qualified education on each day. So these events will really help you to have the qualified education units that you need for the application. So next slide. Okay, so I think I'm gonna ask Tui to introduce our speaker for the healthcare finance. So Tui.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. So yes, this is my pleasure to introduce James Revels. He and I go way back since 2019. And I think like whenever I think of the pandemic, I think of just, that's a long time ago. We met in San Diego and we were both graduate students. Look how far we've come. We were part of the Soul chapter, and he's been great, very knowledgeable and amazing with numbers, and he became treasurer for the Soul chapter as I kind of went on my merry way as in the graduate student council. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. James Revels today and give him the space to talk a little bit about himself before we get started. Thanks, James.
Great. Well, thank you, Tui, for the introduction, and happy to be here with everyone and take beyond with you with this journey as we go throughout the financing section of this preparatory course. So I promise to really help you through this and provide you some tips and tricks in helping answer these questions. So it's just a real pleasure to be with you, and thank you for your time, devoting your time on the weekend to prepare for this exam.
Next slide.
Okay, so so we'll touch on many different financing topics for the financial accounting principles. We'll touch on the operating and capital budgeting. We'll talk about reimbursement methodologies, productivity measures, and a number of different financial controls as we go throughout these questions. So all this will be embedded in the concepts when we go through the different questions in preparing for the exam. So next slide. We'll also touch on revenue generation, strategic planning around business models. We'll talk about strategic decision-making, asset management, and different supply chain and other financial systems as we prepare for this course. Next slide. Okay, let's dive into the questions, and this is our first question. It asks, during the investigation of merger or acquisition, why would it be prudent for a healthcare executive to obtain advice from someone other than internal legal counsel? So our first choice is regular legal counsel may not be objective. Well, this may be true, but I don't think it represents a primary reason for obtaining somebody other than internal legal counsel. And of course, our internal legal counsel has the best interests of the business in mind. But I don't think this may not represent probably our first choice. So let's see what the other options are. B, external legal counsel may have experience with joint ventures. Well, the question asks around merger or acquisition, which is a consolidation of companies. And so the joint venture and given this choice in B really refers to when two business entities come into a contractual arrangement for a common goal around profit. So I think you probably eliminate this as a choice. I probably wouldn't choose this one either. And the next one is C, external legal counsel has the ability to provide the services in a more economic and timely manner. Well, certainly more timely, but in terms of economic, I think if anything, it would be more expensive. So I think you probably eliminate this one as a choice. And then there's D is specialized expertise is needed in this area. So I think when hiring outside legal counsel, it really allows a strategy to include a focus on specialized legal advice as the outside attorney provides the strategic and business focused advice. So it's really about hiring, providing the business with the exact advice they needed and exactly when they need it. So I think D would probably be among the choices, probably our best choice is what I would choose. And what is the answer? It's D. Okay, next question. What organization sets regulations for financial accounting? So the first choice is A, FASB or Financial Accounting Standards Board. And this organization is not-for-profit organizations establishes financial accounting and reporting standards for private and public companies for those that follow GAAP. So this sounds like it could be a good choice, but let's look at the other choices. B is AICPA, American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and they set the ethical standards for the professional and U.S. auditing standards. So it doesn't seem like that's a primary purpose of what's being asked here. So I'm not sure I would choose B. The SEC, this is a governmental agency that is charged with supervision over the corporate sector and capital market participants, and their purpose is for the protection of the investing public. So based on that definition, I'm not sure I would choose C. And then the last choice is D, HFMA, and really HFMA is a not-for-profit company, a corporation that allows its members to achieve optimal performance by providing practical tools and solution, and also education, and providing strategic guidance for those healthcare systems. So based on that definition, I'm not sure I would choose D either. So I think the best answer here, and based on the definitions, I would choose A. Okay, and it's A. Okay, the next question is, as a hospital continually assesses the interests of the community and searches for ways to meet the interests that can be described as predatory. Wow, that sounds pretty bad. And it really refers to pricing strategy in which goods and services are offered at a very low price point. And it's done to drive out competition and creates barriers in the market. So based on that, I'm not sure that would probably be the best choice. B is market-oriented. So when we talk about market-oriented, it's just an approach to business that prioritizes identifying the needs and desires of the consumers by creating products and services that satisfy them. Wow, that sounds like a pretty good definition of what's being asked here. But let's look at our other choices. C is market optimized. Well, this is really all about doing a better job of reaching your business goals by increasing your marketing efforts. So based on that definition, I'm not sure market optimized would be the best answer. And then there's D, differentiated. And this really talks about setting your company apart from competition through some specific elements, such as distribution network or your price point. Based on that, I don't think D would probably be the best answer. So I think among our choices, I would choose B. Okay, and it's B. Next question. Net income as a percent of gross revenues and return on equity are two most important indicators of, well, in the question, it refers to net income and gross revenues. So that should give you a clue right there. Return on equity is your net income divided by your shareholders' equity. So again, it talks about the income statement or net income. So our choices are A, profitability. Well, that could be seems to fit well within what's being asked. Credit worthiness, B. Well, this is about how a lender would tell if you're going to default on your debt obligations. So not sure that would be a great choice. C, market strength. That's about really how you're performing on a relative basis with other markets and on an absolute basis based on historical levels. So I'm not sure if C relates to net income or income statement. And then D is cash position. That's about how much money you have in the bank at a specific point in time in terms of assessing your liquidity. So I'm not sure that would fit in with the net income or return on equity definition. So I think A is probably our best choice. And it's A, great. Okay. What capital structure ratio is considered the best production of financial failure in an organization? Okay, well, before I dive in and start looking at the choices, let's talk about what capital structure ratio is. And then let's focus in on the financial failure in an organization portion of the question. So when we talk about a capital structure, this is done by examining your debt to equity ratio, which is, this is determined what level of debt to the total amount of equity you have. And when we talk about equity, they're referring to the amount of your current cash flow or the amount of liquidity you have in your business. So with that definition, let's see how these choices fit in what's being asked. So A, net asset financing. Well, this really involves equity financing by securing capital in exchange for ownership in your business. So that doesn't really tell us anything about financial failure in an organization or the level of debt to your total equity. B, long-term debt to net assets. This really refers to, it's a measure of leverage of your company, financial leverage. And it really determines what percent of your firm's assets is leveraged by long-term debt. So really, it doesn't really tell us much about a financial failure of an organization. So I'm not sure we choose B either. C, debt service coverage. And this is about measuring your firm's cash flow to pay down its current debt obligations. Well, it looks like it's just in the short term paying its current debt. So that's a pretty good clue that may not be the best answer either when we're assessing financial failure of an organization. And then the last choice is D, the cash flow to debt. So again, in our definition of capital structure ratio, this talks about how your the cash flow to debt and how that how cash flow from operation is used to pay down a company's debt, and how long will it take a company to pay down its debt if it devoted all its cash to debt repayment. So based on that definition, and in that definition, it talks about total debt. So I think I would choose D as the best answer. And it's D. Great. Okay, so financial statements are important in order to, well, let's talk about what the purpose of the financial statement is. And it's to provide information about the results of operation, your financial position, and the cash flows of an organization. So that's our purpose. So with that, let's see the choices we have. Identify, measure, record, and communicate in dollar terms the economics, events, and success of an organization. Wow, that seems to have a lot of the core features in that definition we just talked about. But let's see the other choices. Serve as a serve as a control mechanism for budgeting. Well, that is a one of the features of a financial statement, but it's probably a secondary one, not a primary one. So I'm not sure I would choose B. C, provide detailed financial information for control at the department level. With this information exists in your subsidiary ledger, but it's not part of your financial statements. So I'm not sure I'd choose C either. And then D, provide staffing guidelines to human resource managers. well, this information is independent of your financial statements, so it's not a part of it. So I'm not sure I would choose D. So based on choices, I think A is our probably best answer. And it is A. Great. Okay, 7. Let's look at the next one. And in most cases, the most favorable financial audit opinion the organization can receive is a qualified opinion. Well, this a qualified opinion is issued by the auditor when they're not confident about any specific process or transaction that prevents them from issuing a clean report. So that probably wouldn't be a good choice. I don't think A. And then B, adverse opinion. This represents the worst type of an opinion an auditor can give. That's when they're not satisfied at all with financial statements or discover a high level of material misstatement that results in issuing an adverse opinion. So B doesn't sound like a good choice either. And then there's C, disclaimer of opinion. Well, they're not issuing an opinion at all. And in fact, they're trying to distance themselves from the financial statements and the results. So C doesn't sound like a good choice. And then finally, D, unqualified opinion. So this is what's known as a clean report. And this is a type of opinion that most auditors give and what companies expect to receive from the audit report. So I think based on the choices, D sounds probably the best choice here. Okay, great, D. And number 8, the purpose of financial statements or income statement is to A, present the financial position of an organization at a specific point in time. Well, they're talking about financial position and they're talking about a specific point in time. And that seems to be around definition of a balance sheet, not an income statement or a statement of operations they're referring to. So I probably wouldn't choose A. B, present the reasons net assets change from one period to another. What net assets, that's your statement of changes in stockholders' equity. So really wouldn't be related to an income statement. It's more of a balance sheet thing. And then there's C, presents cash receipts and where they came from and cash disbursements where they went to during an accounting period. Well, that seems to refer to a cash flow of an organization and would represent your cash flow statement. So probably not C. And then finally, D, presenting the operating results of the organizations over a period of time. Where the answer is in the explanation given here. So they're talking about operating results and they're asking about statement of operations. So that gives you a good clue in what the answer to this question would be. And they're talking about over a period of time, meaning your fiscal year. So I think D is the best choice. Great, it's D. Okay, and then the next one is on ratios. So ratios that measure an organization's long-term liquidity are called A, liquidity ratios. Well, when we talk about liquidity ratios, these are used to determine a company's ability to pay its short-term debt obligations. So based on the definition, that doesn't seem to answer the questions being asked. So probably not A. B, profitability ratios. These are financial metrics used to assess a business ability to generate earnings relative to its earnings, revenue, operating costs, balance sheets over a period of time. And basically, it tells you how efficiently a company generates profit and value for its shareholders. So I'm not sure that would be the best answer. B, I'm not sure B would probably be the best result. And then there's C, capital structure ratios. So when we talk about capital structure ratios, really this refers to the amount of leverage in your company. So it really is talking about how these how capital structure ratios may be defined, and they're based on the measures of the firm's long-term stability and structure. So that seems to fit well with the one that's being asked. But let's look at our last choice. which is efficiency ratios. So efficiency ratios is basically, it measures how efficiently a company uses its asset to generate revenues. And it's really its ability to generate those assets. Well, it doesn't really fit into, it doesn't mention anything about long-term liquidity. So I don't think D is the best choice. So based on what we discussed, I think probably C is what I would choose.
James, could I stop you for a second and ask a question?
Yeah.
Somebody asked, is there a ratio called a leverage ratio?
Leverage ratio. I haven't heard of that term. But I think it does refer to capital structure, and when you talk about leverage ratio, I would fit that within the definition of a capital structure, because it really talks about the amount of debt based on the assets you generate, how much is financed through debt. So when you talk about leverage ratios, that's really synonymous with capital structure ratios.
So this is how good this guy is. I looked up the definition. 3 main financial ratios that can be considered leverage ratios: debt ratio, debt to equity ratio, and interest coverage ratio. So he nailed it. So
Great, thank you.
yeah, this is how good he is.
Thank you, Nora. Okay, let's go on the next one. The purpose of strategic financial plan is to, okay, so before we get into that, I want to talk about, let's define a strategic financial plan before we attempt to answer this question. So when we talk about that, it really refers to the really understanding the direction your business is heading and why. So financial planning is really about determining where you spend your money, time, and resources. It's setting the overall goals for your business and it develops a plan to achieve them. So you're taking a step back from your day-to-day operations and asking where your business is headed and what your priorities should be. So really, we talk about the strategic financial plan. Its primary purpose is to develop and maintain a strategic fit between your company's goals and its capabilities to the changing market opportunities. So with that information, let's dive into our choices. Look into 10 years, determine what your business will look like. Well, it's really about ensuring the organization is following its plan to efficiently attain desired short and long-term goals to maximize value for its shareholders. So I don't think A would probably fit into that definition. B, translate strategic plan into next year's objectives. Again, when we talk about the definition of strategic financial plan, it involves taking a step back from your day-to-day operation and asking yourself, where is your business headed and what is its priorities or goals? So not sure I would choose B either. C, convert the operating plan into monetary terms. Again, when we talk about the definition, it's really about setting overall goals for your business and developing a plan to achieve them. So probably C is not a good choice either. And then finally, there's D, identifying resources that will be necessary to accomplish the strategic plan. So that sounds to fit well with what we've discussed. It's about financial planning strategies for your business, which can help determine where you spend your money, time, and your resources based on our discussion. So I think D here is the best choice. And it's D, great.
And the C is a C is a definition for budgeting process. You're converting the operating plan to monetary terms. It's budgeting process.
Right. Okay. Okay, so a zero-based plan or budget can be described as, well, let's talk about what a zero-based budget is. It's really starting from scratch. You're starting from zero. And it's looking for every function within an organization and it's analyzing and assessing based on its needs and costs. And it's probably the most time consuming, but the most accurate way to budget for your organization. So with that definition, let's start for our first choice is A, starting each plan or budget cycle with a clean slate. Wow, that seems like a pretty good definition. But let's look at our other choices. B, adjusting based on realized volumes, adjusting expenses based on realized volumes. Well, you're not really starting from scratch or a zero at that point. And then C, unencumbered funds to be transferred to the next year. Well, you're rolling forward your fund balance from one year to the next. You're really not starting from zero. So probably not C. And then D, limiting department managers to only expenses they control. Well, that doesn't really have anything to do with budgeting at all. That's more of an operational thing. So I think our choices, I would choose A, which seems very obvious based on what is being asked. Okay, great. Indirect costs. Okay. Let's define indirect costs before we jump into this question. So indirect costs are those general services that are not directly traceable to patient care. These are commonly referred to as overhead, facilities, and administrative costs. So things like in healthcare, it would be patient access, patient financial services, health information management, all the back office functions. These are what is known as indirect costs, all the administrative tasks that we do in a healthcare company. So with that definition, let's look at the choices. A, are provided directly to a patient. Well, based on that definition, that's probably the exact opposite of what an indirect cost is. That's a direct cost. So probably wouldn't be A. B, amount to 1/2 of all healthcare costs. Well, most of our total healthcare costs are direct costs. I would say probably 70% of it at least. So probably not B. C, amount to 1/3 of all healthcare costs and services provided to another revenue center. Well, knowing that most of our healthcare costs are direct, this seems to fit well within in answering that question. Plus, it gives you a clue. It says services provided to another revenue center. So these are overhead departments that are supporting, like a nursing unit, or other ancillary area in the hospital. So C sounds like a pretty good choice. And then finally, D can be controlled by a revenue center. Well, that again refers to a direct cost. D doesn't sound like a good choice either. So based on what we've been given, I'm thinking C is probably our best answer. Okay, great, C. Okay, and then the next question asks, a forecast of financial statements establishing an organization's future financial position for a given set of operating conditions or decisions. Wow, that seems like a lot of words in that question. But let's focus on the forecast of financial statements part of the question. And then also it talks about future financial position. So the first choice of productivity measures, and these are really metrics that track your team's efficiency in accomplishing tasks. So really, it doesn't refer to any type of forecasting that's being done. So probably not A. Then there's production cycle, and this is really an indicator of your organization's ability to convert its assets into profits, inventory into products, and then your supply chain into cash flow. So there's no predictive type thing occurring here. So I probably wouldn't choose B. And then C, continuous budgets. This is really about a rolling 12-month budget cycle. So as the oldest budget month drops off, you have a new budget month added on. So it's a rolling 12-month period based on the company's fiscal year. But there's really not a future forecast going on. It's more about your current, tracking your current financial year metrics against your targets. So probably not C. And then finally, D, pro forma. Well, pro forma is a projection of your future expenses and revenue based on your company's past experience and its future plans. So wow, that sounds like a pretty good definition of what they're asking. And let's see what the answer is. D, great. Okay, next question. Oh, that's it.
So before we move forward, James, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we had a question way at the
Sure.
beginning about what kind of information does someone who's not a financial expert need? And you did a really good job of breaking down.
Yeah, I would, there's clues in the questions they're asking. So if you remember when I went through the questions, it talked about, for example, talked about asking about statement of operations or income statement. And I think in the answer, it gave you a clue on, it gave you the exact wording was being asked, meaning it talked about operations. So those type of things you can relate back to find a clue where the answer is. I think the other part of it is I think in the question, and actually, can we go to that question while I'm talking through this? Can we scroll back?
I'll get back there. Let's see. Sorry to take so long. Wait, okay.
In the
Everybody's calling this tricky, yeah, it is, but let me get there. Basically, it was just the question specifically, if we're not financial.
Yeah, if you could, in the slide, if you can just go back and
oh, you're talking, okay, I was going back to
yeah, keep going back one more. Well, for example, this one, it asks about indirect costs. And so it's giving you a choice of direct cost or provide directly to the patient. Well, that's not an indirect cost. Can be controlled by a revenue center. That's a direct cost. And just knowing that our direct costs are, most of our healthcare costs. So it gives you kind of clues to that. And let's go back one more question. This one, a zero-based plan. Well, a zero-based plan is starting each planning budget cycle with a clean slate. Well, I don't even have to read the rest of them to know that that's a pretty close definition. So when you say zero-based, it's really starting from a clean slate. So it's really about understanding some of the terms and definitions behind what's being asked. And let's go back to the prior one. Not this one, go back one more. This one is talks about long-term liquidity. So it's, this one's really about, and it's more technical, but it's really about understanding, the terms and the definitions. So when they talk about liquidity, we know those are more about short-term ratios. And the question is asked about long-term. So again, if you read through these questions, they give you, there is hints to give you an idea of what the answers may be. And I think there was one other one in here that talked about the different financial statements. But I think when they asked about statement of operations, I think in the answer, it gave operating results over a period of time. So without reading through the rest of these choices, I already know that statement of operations and operating results, they seem that they're repeating that same term again in the results. So that is a way to, tell, if you don't, being that you don't have a financial background, it gives you kind of an idea what the answer could be or should be.
But the one with the liquidity is misleading because liquidity is one of the wrong answers, right? Even though it asked it in the answer.
Right. Yeah. So in that case, this is more about understand the definitions behind what's given. So they say long-term liquidity. So, and then they give liquidity ratio. So I agree, it probably is not the best, but when we talk about liquidity ratios, it's really looking like at think about liquidity ratios. They're looking at a current ratio, which is looking at your current assets and your current liabilities. So, so if you become familiar with the definition of these terms, it gives you a clue of how to eliminate some of the answers.
Well,
So,
can I ask a question?
sure.
For normal people who are terrified of finance, which I think is probably about 90% of the people in the room, at least, what would you concentrate on? And two things I've heard you say. One is ratios, learn the ratios and learn the financial statements. What else is the best use of your time to prepare for this?
I think what I would focus on, there are some I think questions and what we're given become very, very technical, such as this one, because it really is, you know, and this answer was the capital structure ratio. You have to know what a capital structure ratio is. So I'm not sure I would get too hung up on the real technical ones, but I think the others that are given in the choice, they're a little bit more not as complicated or technical. So I would concentrate understanding what the different, you know, what different financial statements are, such as the balance sheet and the income statement, and just understanding those definitions and what's provided, what the purpose of those statements are, and that would help answer a number of these questions. There always are going to be some questions that are more technical, but I think if you just focus your time on understand some basic terms and concepts and what's being asked, it would help answer a number of the questions. So that's what I would advise is just focus more on the definitions, and that will at least give you some context and what they're asking.
Let me ask some of the questions that are in the waiting room, or in the chat room rather. Do you actually have to solve any financial problems on the exam?
I don't think so, no. These are more concepts than anything else.
So there was
There are some basic you know, calculations in the exam, but you don't need a calculator. You don't need a calculator. It's just very basic math calculation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One question I did see.
I encountered 1 or 2 questions before when I took the exam. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I didn't see these pop up in the ones we've been through so far. So, but thank you for adding that. But yeah, that's what I would say, which is maybe understand, get just a few terms down in terms of its definitions, and then that would give you a little bit of background and try to answer these questions. Admittedly, some of the, you know, like this one, as I said, it was more technical, but the others, they give you hints and clues in what's being asked and the answers that are being given, and it allows you to eliminate some of the choices.
And if I may add to that, James, also for a non-finance test takers, probably the 4 major reports, knowledge of the basic knowledge of the 4 major financial reports.
Yeah.
You mentioned balance sheets, where the balance sheets, what are the different components of balance sheets, your total current assets, liabilities, those kind of stuff. Your statement of operations, you need to know the different, you know, components of statement of operations, cash flows.
Yeah.
And, you know, the net worth, you know, balance changes, those kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, can we go to that question on the slide, and then that'll help drive that point. So let's look at this question. So it talks about when it gives an answer at a specific point in time, that always refers to a balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And when it says over a period of time, that always refers to income statement. So if you focus on that definition, you don't have to read through the rest of these, because if it's saying over a period of time and it's telling you operating results, well, it's giving you a statement of operations in the question.
Mm-hmm.
And if you knowing that the income statements gives you your activity throughout your fiscal year over a period of time, gives you a good clue that that's the correct answer, and it's giving you operating results in the answer. So in this question, you don't have to get too hung up on the other choices. You can go right to the answer.
And also keep in mind that you don't have to score 100% on every section.
Yeah.
So
And-
you're going to be weaker on some sections than others, and for a
Yeah.
lot of us, this was our weak area.
Right, and there's some, like, I think that one question, the last question I just touched on, it was very, very technical, and you really have to understand what a capital structure ratio is, which, and there are, yeah, there's questions like that, but it's not, it becomes the minority. It's not, you don't see a lot of those that are really that complicated. That are at least what's represented here. So I wouldn't get too hung up on something like that. No, you can't figure out the answer. Just I would focus on the ones that are a little bit more basic and that you're able to answer. Because you want to try to get as many, you don't want to try to cover as many questions as possible in the exam and not get too hung up on the more technical ones that will probably only count for a small percent of the total questions.
Someone's asking if you can address internal rate of return versus return on investment.
Right. So
Trust me when I say the flashcards have all this kind of information.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, James. Didn't mean to interrupt.
yeah, so basically your internal rate of return provides a measure. What it does is your internal rate of return basically provides you a percentage in terms of what return on your investment you should see. So it takes your future future cash flows that's generated from your investment and provides what the present value result from based on your return on that investment. So, and then, well, I'm sorry, what was the second one?
ROI.
Return on investment and return.
Yeah. So your return on investment, again, it's your return on investment is usually described in terms of a net present value. So it's basically it's how much revenue you're able to generate from a capital outlay. So let's say you bought a piece of equipment for your imaging department. So you're out, $200,000 for that equipment. Well, that's going to generate services over the next 5 years. So that revenue will help offset that initial investment. So that is what the return on investment is how much profitability that result or revenue that would result from your initial investment.
And something to consider also in ROI is you need to know the probably it will come, you need to know the formula on how to calculate the return of investment. So it's a basic probably math that you need to learn. So
so essentially return on investments is just the return you have on the initial capital outlay you made.
So Sachin, you are one of the ones that has took the test most recently. So do you recall also getting any specific, just like basic calculations, like Michael said, that you don't need a calculator for?
Yeah, I remember only one question, and that seemed to be the favorite because during my preparation, I've seen that come up often, which is calculating the break-even quantity based on fixed costs, variable costs, and the price. And in several other sample questions when I prepared, that kept coming up. And it's just funny enough, that's the same question showed up in my exam as well. But otherwise, I haven't seen any formula-based questions.
So if we were to give any advice, which all of this is excellent, it boils down to look at, measure your competency on the competency tool that we presented early on, right in the FACHE site. Flashcards are great because they're current, or at least this is what ACHE is concentrating on currently. And in the back of the cards, you'll get references for where within the resource books that you can find those answers.
Okay, so thank you, James, for the very enriching discussion for finance, healthcare finance. It's really very insightful. Thank you very much, and your knowledge is always appreciated, and your expertise is always appreciated in this review session. Thank you. So I think we're ready to tackle on the human resources part of this session, right? So I would like Sashan to introduce our next speaker. Sashan, go on,
So
please.
thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Sherry. Sherry is a nursing executive, worked with companies like Kaiser and Dignity Health for several years. I've been fortunate enough to work with her for last few years. She's been, I think since we've been offering our BOG prep sessions for over 10 years, I think she's been a key part, at least from 2016, as a presenter, and also she was also one of the chairs of this very committee in the past. We owe a lot to her in terms of what she's helped us build this program to be. And it's my pleasure and honor to have her join us to continue to help all of you to prepare for this exam. Thank you, Sherry, for being here.
Well, thank you, Sashan, and thank you, everyone, both on our committee here for the BOG and those that are taking their Saturday morning to be with us for preparing as a leader for the Board of Governors exam prep. So thanks. I have also had the honor of being a service award recipient, but I've done that amongst some great leaders on this committee that have devoted a lot of time and energy, including Nora, who I worked with initially on the committee in terms of service. So thank you, appreciate it. Great to be here. All right, well, we're going to do human resources, and we'll take our first slide here, and we're going to review quickly the topics, and you'll have this available to you. And one of the things that is important to remember in the human resources world and the exam in general is that this is at the federal level, or at because you're not going to be looking at California laws in this exam since it's administered across the United States. So you'll be looking at federal labor laws and some of the federal statutes. And as you look at that, one of the things I found was helpful would be to take some of these topics, FMLA, EEOC, ERISA, around pensions and so forth, and just create a grid. And you'll probably hear that throughout the review exam sessions, is if you create a grid with the, on the left side, with the actual legislative package or whatever you're looking at, and then some key terms that you'll want to look at. Another trick that I also followed with this is if there's a topic that you are seeing that you're not familiar with, you've probably already started your definition sheet. And somebody mentioned it earlier in the chat, is a lot of things are matching definitions and your understanding of those definitions so that you're comfortable with that topic if you see it on the exam. So performance management and different things like that, you may have had experience in that particular arena. And so you'll kind of be relying on some of the things that you've had been exposed to and so forth. But as we look at some of these things, if there's something that speaks to you that you just are jotting down and understanding more of the definitions, and of course using the book that is important too for your review session. So these are some of the topics: motivators for employees, and it's current data that comes up, but you'll be looking at some pioneers in the area of HR as you see some of the theories and topics that will come up. And compensation and benefit packages, important to know some general terms around that. So next slide, some of the more topics, additional topics you'll be familiar with or become comfortable with. Again, employee safety security, it's looking at it from a national level, but OSHA obviously crosses over all states. And if you haven't been part of a, job role or work-related role where there's been a collective bargaining agreement, if you've worked with in a unionized, brush up on that area, because there are a lot of questions related to collective bargaining agreements, CBAs, and what is acceptable or not. We'll have some practice questions on that as well. And we consider that labor relations practices and strategy. I would say job design, job description, and job analysis is an important group of topics and questions you'll see in the exam, and we'll go over those again today as well. But it becomes kind of an integral part to human resources. There's other areas, and Rick's video is excellent. He does a phenomenal job. He's done it for years, but describing kind of the basics of HR, the planning processes, and all the components of it. So a great video to review, as all the videos are that you have access to. And the succession planning, always an important topic anyway for any of us in our areas of expertise or fields, and chance for you to look at that. So we're going to go over some of the questions, and I know that you've heard the term brain walk, and brain walk meaning you're walking your brain through the question, but it's really an opportunity for you to read the question slowly, and that way it will, as I talk about myself, I need to kind of provide myself some inner security and sanction myself so that I read it slowly. And I love Nora's recommendation, she might have mentioned it earlier, is even read the question backwards. And that's helpful because these questions are designed to provide distractors. They're designed to, give you some thought processes going through it. And the distractors sometimes you could recognize. Some of the other tips too, you might have gone over those, is true, true, false, what could be false. So I think what I'll do is, as we go through it, I'll ask you to put your answers in the chat, but I'm gonna ask the team to help us do some of that brain walk. So our first question, mandatory bargaining topic. So as you go backwards and say bargaining topic, you're going to look at something that would be part of a collective bargaining agreement and some of the labor practices. And as you look at this, I think one of the things you'll look at is, are they bargaining for current employees, or are they bargaining for retired employees? Is performance bonds something that would really be part of what a labor and collective bargaining agreement would be over? Would preferred hiring of union members over non, would that be something that the union would be engaged in, or the collective bargaining? Or would it be job descriptions? And as we look at job descriptions, there's a lot in job descriptions, including mandatory and conditions of work that are part of the bargaining process, is anything that relates to conditions of work and mandatory certifications and different things. So as we look at that, what are some of our answers? If I see
a lot of D's.
A lot of D's. Okay, great. That's great. You've got it. So D is the answer. And as I mentioned, it has to do with really whatever is created in that job description that requires mandatory certifications, or sometimes there'll be job descriptions that talk about the conditions of work and so forth. So number 2, we'll go through. The primary purpose of a well-developed, so focus on well-developed performance appraisal system. So as you think of that, and you're looking that the question has now been expanded, and we look at some of these answers that have been provided, your understanding of employee relations and different things, and how to create that strong communication bond with employees, but more importantly, how that they get feedback delivered to them and so forth. So as I read the question, I'd want to look at something that has a lot of juice in it, or a lot of robustness. So we have people answering B. So let's look at the answer. And you are correct. You can't emphasize developmental feedback and guidance. And those are a lot of the flavor of the questions too, is supporting employees through appropriate feedback and different things in the performance measurement or performance appraisal system. Question 3 next. So as we look at interview processes, I know many of you have even been part of interview, different types of interview formats. So a good time, if there's one there that doesn't make sense to you, is write it down for a definition. But as you do an interview, you want to make sure that you are getting enough information about the employee to make a sound decision. And what would do that in these 4 answers? And it looks like we're getting a variety of
B and D.
B and D, yeah. And interesting enough, if it's a structured interview, you're going to be asking employees about when was there a time when you found that you needed to reach out to others within your team. Can you describe to us an event that occurred? Some of you have probably been part of that. So I think I'm giving you some clues for, yeah, the correct answer is A. And Rick or Nora, you guys do such a great job with the brain walk. Is there anything that you would have advised for this one?
I defer to Rick.
Thank you.
I was about to defer to Nora. No, I think, you know, look at, and James said the same thing earlier, is look at the question first and really spend some time trying to figure out what is it they're looking for. So the most important word in this question is not, because it's so easy to skip over the not. And then, of course, the fact that it's a structured interview compared to, you know, just a more general discussion. So that's going to help you with the narrowing down. And by the way, the first time I read this one, I totally missed not. I read over it and
Totally.
positive. So
Yeah.
yeah, so be real careful on that.
So I read it backwards and caught it.
Perfect. And that's exactly what we recommend, because as even I described it, you want to make sure that you are looking at the question, reread it 3 times if you need to, so that you're finding out what they're talking about in that question. So next one. Thank you, team. With growing frequency, employees who have been dismissed are resorting to lawsuits for redress. And this is where you would reach out to your legal counsel, which I will. In some cases, the court may find in favor of the plaintiff if the employer dismissed that plaintiff. So you have your answers here. But I think as you look at this, you know, don't let the question scare you in terms of some of the legal terms, but just be thinking about some basic terms: cause, without cause, and so forth, and write that down in your definition. I call it my definition database. And it looks like we're getting some B's.
We're also
and
getting some A's.
some A's as well. So that's good because you've narrowed it down to 2. So looking at C and D would be false, right? So go ahead and let's look at the answer, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. And I will ask my legal counsel to weigh in on this. Rick.
Gonna keep doing this to me, huh? So, yeah, so I mean, again, I'm gonna go through and think of this true, false, and you know, if you're being fired for with cause, they're less likely to do it. And the question is, who requires progressive discipline? Only if it was somewhere in a collective bargaining agreement, and that's what the lawsuit is about. Firing someone without cause, then you start asking, well, okay, was there some kind of bias or, you know, some other outside reason that might cause a court to reverse it? And we're probably talking at-will employees here. Before the end of the probation period, that's certainly the best time to get rid of them before you give probation or past probation have to do something worse. So I know C is wrong. Now D is something we've heard about in the news recently with Amazon and Starbucks, and the question of are they retaliating against people who are trying to organize a union? So, you know, that's one that might be. So, I mean, I'm kind of drawn to that one as I go through this, but I'm really sure that the without cause is a better answer. So I would have gone with that one.
Thanks, Rick.
If
And
the B
my-
wasn't up there, by the way, with the answer, I might have gone with D, but since it was there.
Thank you. My emphasis here is on anyone in HR has to rely on their legal counsel. There's labor law, there's different, but at the same time, you do need to have some of a basic understanding of some of these basic definitions. So be sure to review with cause, without cause in terms of some of these issues around HR and employment continuation or not continuation. All right, next question.
And remember, this isn't California or any state specific. This is national.
Correct.
Don't
Thank you,
go
Nora.
down
Yeah.
that rabbit hole.
Yeah,
You're thinking, okay, well, California, we have to,
exactly.
or New Jersey.
So which activity should precede the beginning of a recruitment process for new employees? So reading that very slowly, new employee backwards, recruitment, and proceed. So before you've actually even started the recruitment process, what should the employer consider doing? So, and these questions are great examples of questions you'll come across that you really have to read it slowly. And as you are putting answers in, I'm seeing some D's, and though obtaining information from employees in a similar position to assess the validity of the job description, that means you've already written a job description and you're kind of working backwards, assessing the cost of forms of recruitment. That could be in your cycle of recruitment, but what would precede the beginning of a recruitment process? Making a decision to emphasize internal, external recruitment. Again, something that's important, but I like that you're putting a lot of D's in. So let's see what the answer is. You're correct. Right. You really need to look. Sometimes you even need to make the decision if somebody has left their position, do we actually need the position? Of course, that's been happening quite a bit lately. Looking at the job, can it be restructured? Can it report in a different reporting structure? Do you need to really reconsider the position if it's essential to your business function or to your operating benefits? So doing a job analysis is the first step before you even start.
Jerry, this is one of those ones where it seems like all four options are true. So you have to, there's no all of the above here. So you have to say, okay, well, they're all true, but which is the best answer? And
Right.
usually it's going to be the broadest one.
Great question. And I like your thinking there, and you've been very helpful supporting that with all those folks taking this, is think broad in some respects. If you're struggling with the answer, just think broad. That's a good tip. All right, next question, number 6. The evaluation of senior management is best administered. And take a look at these answered. Best administered. And you might be eliminating some of them and thinking, what is senior management in an organization? Think about that. And what would be important for anyone that would be evaluated. So their distractor in that question might be senior management. Think general is what would anyone be evaluated on in any of their job roles and so forth. So I'm seeing some, let's see, I'm seeing some A's. And again, if you looked at, there's different organizational charts where you'll see different folks, but don't let the senior management in this case throw you off. And it looks as though we will majority A. So what's the answer here? And that's right. It is across the board. Anyone has and should be providing evaluation based on established criteria that's known both to the evaluator and the person being evaluated. So kind of a general topic that you'll see in some of these answers and some of these questions.
I lean to A over B because of the word senior management. I was thinking, okay, with just your normal level employee, you do an annual review or you do a 6-month probation. It was something that's scheduled, where I think with senior management, you're more likely to do it, not just the once a year formal sit down, but maybe in result of a crisis or something, you're more likely to do it periodically unscheduled. So that's how I was viewing it and went with A.
Thank you, Rick. All right, number 7.
And one more thing for that is, oh, sorry.
Go
Can you
ahead.
go back to number 6, please? And I think the number 6 question also is, it's known to both parties. So I think during the hiring process, they know already what are the, evaluation factors, because it's part of the job description, correct? So
And-
that's how I see it. So it's already known to both parties, the
Yes.
criteria, because during the application process, you should know all your criteria as a senior management or as as an employee, future employee.
Absolutely. The job, it's everything sort of circles back to the job description. So, and then obviously, and it's a tip, and I'm sure you've heard it before, I can't emphasize it enough when you're in an interview for any position, but as you move up in your career, as you will with your fellow in the American College of Healthcare Execs, is to ask, how can I be successful in this position? And so there'll be specific criteria, but important question to ask in the interview as well. All right, number 7. And the critical incidents technique of employee performance appraisal requires raters too. Now, you might see some topics that you haven't come across or that aren't as familiar. So in this case, you're going to look at the title, critical incidents technique, but really focus on what's important in an employee performance appraisal. So this would be one you might want to put in your definition database, but look at these answers and look at some things that would not ring true, like false. And as you put your suggestions in for the answer here, and you might even be Googling critical incidents technique. You can't bring your phone into the exam, but it might be in your database that you're working on.
Just a quick note that performance management is something that I've, in my exam, and I did last year, there were 4 questions actually. And part of it, to be honest, actually, I wasn't able to spend much time on reading the HR portion of the material, but the definitions were key. One example I remember was about forced ranking. They were asking, in which situation do you use something like that? So to Sherry's point, I think understanding those specific techniques or putting it in that list of readings to do is going to be very helpful.
Thank you, Sachin. And and again, using Rick's suggestion, a general term, more comprehensive. So let's look at the answer and then we'll do the brain walk backwards. And D is the correct answer. As you look at giving an employee evaluation, you are going to look at events, behaviors, activities of the employee, and where they are in both good and poor performance. So this is kind of a generalized answer that responds to this critical incidence of employee performance. Requires raters too. So when you look at that term raters, and you mentioned, Sachin, another term too, in terms of rating employees, and I think that's a good topic to look up. Anything to add, Rick, on this one?
Yeah, I was looking at the critical incident specifically, and without even remembering the definition, which I don't, the only one that jumped out at me is looking at critical was, well, what was good, what was bad? Those were the ones that stood out in both directions. So my guess was that was what they were talking about, critical incident, where none of the others had anything to lead me towards that.
Great. Great suggestions. All right, 8. All right, one of our favorite Hertzberg hygiene and motivators, theory of motivation. You want to write a few of these on your grid if you decide to do a grid or however you study, and make sure you put the key elements of Hertzberg's hygiene and motivators. So let's look at what's true or false in this. Maybe do that. In the definition between extrinsic and intrinsic needs to be incorporated into your study plan, and looking at what's external to an employee and what comes from within. And in this case, the question here is a good one. It asks you to look at the theory, but what more importantly, you want to be able to describe what for the general employee work group, what is one of the most important indicators for motivation. So why don't you put some of yours? A lot of you have probably studied Hertzberg or had reference to it, what you're seeing. And think of intrinsic. What are intrinsic motivators versus extrinsic? What comes from within? And so let's look at the answer here.
Yeah.
And
Most
who
people
wants to take this one on the team? It's a good one.
Most of them, they answered C.
Yeah. So even though I use the term intrinsic, money and intrinsic to the job itself doesn't mean it's intrinsic to the individual. So oftentimes it's been stated, and we find that to be true over and over, is that money and some of the benefits and that hasn't really motivated those of us in the workplace. But what it can do is adequate compensation can be a dissatisfier. And so oftentimes that's where leaders will, or any of you in your workforce would say that it actually isn't the initial motivator, but it can be a dissatisfier. It can, unfortunately, have some effect on morale. And if we have time, if anyone else wants to provide some feedback on this question too, that's great.
Well, just I think everyone is probably more familiar with Maslow because Maslow just keeps popping up, and Hertzberg looks at the lower levels of Maslow and say they don't motivate you, but if they're not there, they demotivate you, and then it's the two top levels of Maslow that are actually the motivators. So if you know Maslow, which I'm pretty sure everyone does, then you can kind of do that comparison to link them together.
Thanks, Rick. I love the way the hygiene in the question, and they created A as the distractor. So it's kind of fun. It's all okay to take a little laugh during the exam. I think that's all my questions. Do I have? Let's go next slide. Yep, that was me. So thank you so much. I'll hand it back.
Thank you, Sherry. I think we have 9 minutes remaining. Do we have enough time for 2 or 3 supplemental questions? We do, all right? Two or 3? Tui, can you give us? Can you please share some of the supplemental questions?
Sorry, one moment. Let me pull that out really quickly. Thank you.
And even if we don't go over the supplemental questions here, we will provide them in our follow-up emails.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Let me know if you can see the screen, everyone, for first one of finance.
Yeah. Maybe 2 or 3 questions for finance.
Okay. So the first one asks a set of medical codes used to report medical, surgical, and diagnostic procedure and services. So it gives, is it A, CPT, B, diagnosis related group, C, ICD-10 codes, or D, SNOMED codes. So let's see what everyone chooses. So I would choose A, CPT, because these are represents what are used for billing medical and surgical procedures. Diagnosis related group is really classifying patients based on common diagnosis. So that wouldn't really relate to the questions being asked. It's really a classification for reimbursement and reporting. The ICD-10 codes, it's really about, again, it's a billing function. It's really about the different diagnosis of the patients for billing purposes. And the SNOMED is really, this is a terminology used in health information management. So I don't think that specifically relates to what's being asked. So I think out of these choices, A seems like it would be closest to what's being asked.
Yeah.
Again, and let's go back to this one. So it's really about just understanding the terminology and the definition of these terms they're asking about, as we talked about before. So, and that would help in terms of the process of elimination. And let's go on the second one. Ratio measures, a ratio that measures an organization's long-term liquidity by measuring a variety of relationships to capital. Well, this one gives you a pretty big clue on what the answer is without even knowing the definition, what the ratio is. Capital structure, fixed asset ratio, capital structure ratio, unrestricted net assets, or liquidity ratio. So I think you probably pretty much guess what the answer to this one is. And the answer is B, yep. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Process of converting the operating plan into budgets for capital expenditures. Well, it's not your operating revenue because it mentions capital expenditures. Capital budgeting, well, that sounds, they're mentioning capital in what they're asking. So it sounds like that would be a good choice. The financial strategic plan, well, based on how we defined it earlier, we know that probably would be a good choice. And then your working capital is just your assets, less is your liabilities. So, which is your cash flow. So I think here B would probably be the best choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, print bill, submit bill, follow up on a bill, and collect bill, or bill resolution it's called. What do we think?
Getting a lot of A's here.
It sounds to me like that's a payment cycle. Because you're going from creating the bill and you're sending the bill out and you're getting a payment. What's the answer? Yep, C.
Mm.
Okay, next.
I would have gone with revenue cycle because that's like the buzzword now, revenue cycle management. But
well, revenue cycle, these are all the administrative and clinical functions that contribute to the capture and collection of patient service revenue. So that's why that would not be a good choice. So again, understanding that definition, what that really means.
see, this is why this guy's good.
So and I think payment cycle is part of the production cycle, right, James? Because production cycle,
Yes.
you know, yeah, it has the pre-care, care, and the payment cycle. So
yeah, I mean, it covers all of that.
yeah.
But the big clue in this question is, hey, they're saying they're generating the bill, they're sending the bill out, they're collecting the payment. that seems like, that would be how long it takes to collect the payment from initiation
Yeah.
to the ultimate collection.
Yeah, and a payment cycle is part of the revenue generation, which is revenue generation encompasses everything, if I'm right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I think we have 2 minutes left, and we are about to end the session, right? So if you have any questions, just email us so that we can answer your questions. Any additional closing remarks, Nora, Rick, or from the team? Shashan, Twee, James? Any additional remarks or closing remarks? To
No, I would just, I appreciate everybody's feedback and some of the great questions that were asked today. I think it was really helpful, and it made the session, I think the session really more productive. So.
And Sherry, any closing remarks from you, Sherry?
No, I think the way you are approaching the questions, listen, your team has some great recommendations. Folks have asked if there's sample grids, and it's kind of up to how you study best, what works. Everybody has a different method for studying, and creating your own grid is just very helpful. I've put the topic on the left and then definitions and maybe a few key points. I did that with some of the topics that could be grouped together, like either the finance world or in the HR world, laws and legislation and that type of thing. So, but best to you all, this is the best way to do it, is to learn from the experts here on how to take the exam, brainwalk.
I agree with what Sherry said about it's best to do it yourself, because it really helps you pull together the information, not just try to memorize the grid that someone else created. But if people aren't sure what it looks like, I'm going to take an excerpt from one of the ones that I have, and we'll send that out just to show what we're talking about when we say a grid, what we're looking at.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, and thank you very much for your participation today. And we hope to see you again next week. We will be tackling healthcare and leadership and business knowledge next week, and same time and same location in the web. So thank you very much, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you.